Hi, I'm Catherine Pack, Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of the Australia Chair here at CSIS, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Pacific Policy Pulse. I'm very pleased to have with me here today Dr. Mira Rapp-Hooper. She is a partner with the Asia Group and formerly was Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for East Asia and Oceania at the White House National Security Council. Thanks, Mira, for joining us.
Delightful to be here with you, Catherine.
So you have a unique perspective, having worked on the Pacific and the broader Indo-Pacific from both inside and outside of government. When you think about the Pacific, what is one of the most urgent issues that current U.S. policymakers should be thinking about right now?
When I think about the Pacific, it has always struck me that in many ways it is a microcosm and all-encompassing of what we seek to achieve in both our broader regional and global strategies. Of course, each one of these countries matters very much in their own right, but they are also important litmus tests for how we are doing in the world. For example, if you think about the general strategy that the United States has adopted on a bipartisan basis for the last several administrations that says that we seek to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open, whether or not that is true is something that we should look at the Pacific Islands to judge. Whether or not island nations can navigate their waters freely, whether they're able to exploit their own natural resources for use by their own economy, whether they can conduct free and fair election without coercion or outside influence. These are all fundamental indicators of how the United States is doing on the global stage. And it's very important to look closely at individual Pacific Island nations to know whether or not that is true. Likewise, indicators of how the United States is doing as a global problem solver, whether we are helping nations adapt to radical and rapid climate change, whether we are able to provide viable alternatives to what the PRC might be putting on offer by way of investment or infrastructure. All of these questions come home in the Pacific Islands. So to my mind, policymakers put themselves at a disadvantage when they think about the Pacific Islands being a world away, relatively small island nations with huge exclusive economic zones. Rather, it is important to situate ourselves in the fact that everything we seek to do in the world matters deeply in this part of the region. And by looking and working with each one of these countries, we get litmus tests and a mirror reflected back to us of how well we're doing.
Yeah, excellent points across the board. So I'd like to shift focus onto the Quad. When you were at the White House, you were intimately involved in advancing the Quad relationship between the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. When you look at the next couple of years, how do you see the relevance of the Quad across the Pacific?
Well, in my view, one of the great achievements of the Biden administration and of all of our partners was taking the Quad to the leader level and not just doing that symbolically, but doing that in a way that allowed not only our four leaders to come to common strategic understandings, but to use that venue to start delivering real results for the region. I think we heard in the early year or so of the Quad, both from friends in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, that they had some questions about what the Quad was seeking to do. Was this the new military alliance? What was its purpose? And as a result of that, we actually focused the Quad on delivering public goods for the region, demonstrating that we could do real practical projects on the ground that would make a difference for everyday people throughout the region. Some of the examples that I like to point to of projects that I think were really successful, probably first among them, an initiative called the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, which has brought an advanced maritime domain awareness technology to the Pacific Islands, to Southeast Asia, and to the Indian Ocean. Also projects, including in the Pacific Islands, like an ORAN testbed initiative with Palau, which allow us to test out some critical 5G technology and a key Pacific Island partner. So that delivery for the region, I think, is going to remain critical for the Quad. But it also is the case that every administration, every new iteration of the Quad has the ability to rebrand it and put its own focus on it. And I hope that that will continue. Secretary Rubio took the initiative of holding a Quad foreign ministers meeting directly following President Trump's inauguration. And Secretary Rubio has made sure that the foreign ministerial level remains an anchor of this partnership going forward. My hope is that the Quad will meet again at the leader level relatively soon, and will push forward on initiatives that remain of critical interest to all of its members, including maritime security and critical technology. I would humbly suggest to anyone who's still working on the Quad and the current administration that that aspect of centering delivery for the region will remain incredibly important. Again, those conversations amongst leaders are absolutely invaluable, but if you can demonstrate to partners in the Pacific and Southeast Asia that the Quad delivers for them, then the narrative kind of sells itself.
Thanks so much. We'll wrap up with, what book are you reading these days?
Well, a book that I only recently received and will confess that I have just started is a book called The Soldier and the State by Kori, who is a wonderful scholar, historian, observer of international relations at the American Enterprise Institute. And it is a history of civil military relations in the United States. I think it's an incredibly salient topic right now. And there's no one better to give the account than Kori. So I'm really looking forward to diving into it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, thanks so much, Mira, for joining us on Pacific Policy Pulse.
It's great to see you, Catherine.